All right, my friends, let's talk about people, talking about me, talking about philosophy. In this edition of Comments on Comments, we're going to be pretty much talking exclusively about Lance Independent. He was nice enough to offer a critique of a video I did on an objective argument for morality that was embedded kind of in a video attempting to demonstrate how moral arguments for the existence of God might fail. And then he and I also did a little live thing where we talked a lot about philosophy, academic philosophy, YouTube philosophy, but didn't ever really touch on much philosophical theory. So those are the things I'm going to talk about. If you are interested, stick around. If not, go watch the best global voice auditions. It gets wild. And the judges from around the globe are making spectacular fashion choices. First, I want to look at Lance's critique of my argument for an account of objective morality without God. If you watch the video, I present a kind of neo-Kantian constructivist account of what morality could look like even if God isn't in the picture. Lance and I believe, have a common subscriber who may have recommended the video to him, and he was nice enough to do a live stream where he watched chunks of the video and analyzed it while engaging with folks in his chat. There are a few reasons I would strongly encourage people to go check out this video and the rest of Lance's stuff. First, he's a super nice guy, and he's talking about really cool, interesting things at a pretty damn high level. Second, go look at the live stream of him critiquing my video. It'll give you a sense of what it's like to present an argument in academia. Because the criticism you're going to get there is way different than what happens in kind of YouTube comment sections. People will ask you to justify everything, and they will critique everything. And if there is a disagreement to have, they will find it. Lance did a really great job of that, and it leads to the third reason why you should go watch the video. Every criticism he made was justified. Now, I don't think all of his criticisms are a reflection of the weakness of my position, but I think all of them are a reflection of the weakness of my presentation of that position, explanation of that position, or looseness of the language I used when explaining that position. I let myself off the hook a little bit because my goal in presenting that video is to get people to think, to try to make philosophy accessible to people who haven't done it. Some of the criticism is just a result of that. The last reason I'd encourage people to go check it out is watch the chat. It gives you a little bit of an idea of what being in a graduate student office in a philosophy department might be like. Lots of people with lots of confidence, lots of enthusiasm, excited to talk about and criticize the positions that they're confronting. So what I'm going to do is introduce and explain a few concepts that Lance's critique illustrated that I did not explain well enough in the original video. And then we'll watch a few clips, and hopefully armed with these new explanations and concepts, we can respond to his critiques, maybe defend my position a little bit, and also maybe illustrate where his and my disagreements really lie. So the first things I want to clarify are, 1, I'm not even sure if I need to or want to commit to moral realism. All I want to commit to is the idea that there are moral facts that are stance independent. Now that might just be the definition of moral realism, but more or less I want to say there are claims we can make that are right and wrong, true and false, have a truth value, and that truth value does not change depending on the particular subjective preferences of the people involved. Whether you like chocolate or vanilla, whether you like sushi or steak, what your particular preferences are irrelevant to the truth value of the sorts of moral claims that I'm advocating are true. The second thing I want to say, if we want to talk about them as being real, the only thing I really care about is they are considered as real as anything else. Their truth value and whatever obligation we have to the truth is the same as a statement like 2 + 2 = 4, or gravity affects middle-sized physical objects in such a way that they fall at approximately 9.8 meters per second. You can pick whichever one of those you like better. There are moral claims that we can make that are just as truthy and just as justified as those other claims, and we should have the same commitment to their truthiness and justification that we do to statements like 2 + 2 = 4 or gravity works X way. Third, and it's a topic that's going to come up a bunch, is that I conceive of value as being a property. To borrow an example that someone used in the comment section of Lance's video, firewood is valuable because firewood has the properties that allow it to satisfy a desire or a want or a need or fulfill an inclination, intention, or goal that someone has, regardless of whether or not the person is in the moment actually using the firewood. So I'm going to say a stack of firewood outside has value because there are people who are cold who potentially could use that firewood to satisfy their desire. And for some people, this seems weird, but I don't think it's any weirder than talking about something like buoyancy. And I use that example because we say something's buoyant if it floats. And we say it's a property of the piece of wood or cork or paperclip that it will float. But not all buoyant things will float the same way in the same liquids. Some of them will float in honey but won't float in water. But we don't say that buoyancy is stance dependent because no one's perspective changes the fact as to whether or not the paperclip floats or sinks. What changes the buoyancy is the circumstance in which the thing is put. And that's the way I think of value. The firewood is valuable because it has the properties that allow it to satisfy a rational desire of some person. I don't think we only can think of value as an action. The fact that someone isn't currently consciously valuing something doesn't eradicate its value, given my view. Lastly, and tied to my comment about realism or stance independence, and stating that certain moral claims have the same sort of knowableness as claims like 2 + 2 = 4, or gravity works this way, or the principle of non-contradiction, rules of practical rationality. I am not saying that everybody is always compelled by reason or math to follow the rules and regulations of reason or math. I'm just saying in that morality is just as truthy, just as justifiable, and just as knowable, that moral claims can have the exact same weight as logical facts or mathematical facts or empirically justifiable facts. And none of those things were explicitly in the first video. Let's take a look at some of the comments Lance makes and see if these new additional explanations help us respond to his concerns. So in this chunk, he's responding to the summary I sort of gave at the end of the video, where I go back over the argument and try to explain what I think it illustrated. Specifically right here, he's talking about the portion where I say that because one's psychological faculties and capacities that make them a person are responsible for their ability to find value in anything in the world, their personhood is valuable. But he identifies a way in which I kind of misspeak or speak loosely about it. But also, I think it really illustrates the difference between the conception of value we're working with, and hopefully this new one I just gave you will help us out.
I find a hidden stash. I'm like in the desert. I'm lost in the desert, and I find a stash of water. And so, I'm saved. I got enough water. I'm going to be able to make it out of the desert, right? A big stash. Let's say that stash was put there by Reflective Journey. You put it there. You put the stash there. But I don't know that. Do I necessarily value you for having put it there? Because if you hadn't put it there, I wouldn't have the water and I would die. So do I necessarily value you for putting it there, even if I don't know that you put it there or that you exist? It seems like he might be committed to saying that, and that seems weird. I don't know. Am I doing analytic philosophy? That sounds like a counterexample. It's a thought experiment. Oh no, I don't catch me doing analytic philosophy. But like that is my reaction to that is I don't think you have to value the person that put the water there. And so if there's some precondition or characteristic of a thing that's necessary for the thing, but I'm not aware of it, I don't know that it follows that I necessarily value it, even if I don't know about it. That I don't. How would I value it? What would that mean? That seems like a strange notion of value. Again, I'm open to there being a construal of value in which that would be true.
So it's awesome that one, Lance was doing a little analytic philosophy, and two, the construal of value that I think works is the one I just gave. It's thinking of the water as having properties that when exposed to a conscious being with certain sorts of desires, wants, needs, etc., or anything that allows someone to create value, then those necessary conditions that he, as he puts it, for the satisfaction of that desire, the achievement of one's goal, are valuable because the water has those properties that allow you to satisfy your thirst when you're about to die from dehydration in the desert. So, given my new definition, yes, reflective journey, who I believe is the screen name of someone who was in the chat, is valuable because but for reflective journey, you die in the desert. This second clip really illustrates how we can build off the first to hopefully address some of Lance's concerns. I want you to keep an eye out for a few things because there's some really interesting stuff happening. One, keep in mind the account of value that I fleshed out at the beginning of this video, the analogy to buoyancy. And I want you to pay attention to where he talks about feet, when he talks about gold, and when he asks for a contradiction. Because I think we can see something really, really cool about doing philosophy from this clip. If one values anything, they value themselves as a creature with those four characteristics. And
that is where I have a key issue, like the illicit leap. So let's say I value those four characteristics in myself. Why would it follow that I must value them in other people? That I don't have to care about these conditions in and of themselves. If they're conditions that are needed for me to achieve my goals, fine. Then I'm like, okay, I might think, okay, so I need these conditions in order to achieve my goals. Okay, but it doesn't mean that I think that the conditions are good in themselves. I think that they're good because they allow me to achieve my goals. They are not my goals. I don't have the goal of having free will. I don't have the goal of having practical rationality. I just need those things in order to get the glass of. So sure, okay, I'm glad I have those things because they allow me to achieve my goals. But that doesn't mean that I think that those things are good simpliciter or something. They're good because I need my feet to walk around. That doesn't mean that I have to care about other people's feet. Like I do. I'm glad other people have their feet and they can get around too. But I don't think that it follows from the fact that I value my feet, that I must value other people's feet because my feet are necessary for me to walk around. And yeah, okay, so their feet are necessary for them to walk around. It doesn't follow that if I value my feet for me to walk around, that I have to value other people's feet for them to walk around. Why would that follow? Any creature? No, I don't. I don't have to think that. I might think that. I do generally think other people matter, but I'm just saying, you're not rationally obligated to think that because you are a creature that has these characteristics, therefore it's good for any creature to have these characteristics. You could just think, yeah, it's good. I'm glad I have them, but it doesn't mean you have to value them. I'm just not obligated to care about other people's goals or interests or values, just because I care about my own. I just don't see how that would follow. And this is something I asked Richard Brown. If there's a contradiction here, I'd like to. This is a case where I'd like to see it formalized. Like, what am I committed to? Where there's I'm committed to P and not P. What is the specific contradiction? I would like to see what that contradiction is. It's hard to analyze this because it's so unclear what the contradiction is supposed to be. He's not explicitly laying it out. So it might be something like it would be contradictory to think the four conditions are valuable, and then to value them in yourselves, and then another person has the conditions, and then you think they're not valuable. So imagine if I think this piece of gold is 100 grams, and you're holding a equally sized piece of gold, and I say, well, my piece of gold is 100 grams, but yours isn't. That seems kind of stupid. Assuming it's the same substance, it's going to be the same, and it's the same size or whatever. It would be weird to say mine has a certain amount of a certain property and yours doesn't. It's going to have the same property regardless of who's holding it or whose it is. And so someone might think, if your agency, your free will or whatever is valuable, it'd be ridiculous to say yours is valuable, but another person's isn't valuable. Because if yours has the property of valuableness, then another person's is going to have the property of valuableness because it's the same thing. But that's not how I see value. I don't see value as a property of things. I see value as it's a verb. It's not a noun. Like, I value things. Things don't have value. I could say that they have value, but that doesn't mean that they actually have the property of value or valuableness independent of me valuing them.
So a handful of really cool things in this clip. First, Lance is totally right that my language was really loose, if not just misguided at times. I should have been making really, really clear distinctions between value, valuing, and something being valuable. To extend our conception of value to his feet example, I would be arguing that feet are necessarily valuable to a person who enjoys walking. And if they say, no, they're not valuable to me, then, well, chop off your feet and see how far you get. They are necessary conditions of satisfying a particular desire. If you want to walk on your feet, you have to have them. And that's the way I am viewing those psychological capacities that one has with regard to creating value in the world at all, valuing anything at all. So when I'm saying a being who is rational, reflective, has wants, needs, desires, inclinations, and believes they act freely, then those criteria collectively are what allow them to value anything at all, whatever their subjective preference is, whether it's to walk, to run, to lay in bed, or to chop off their feet. And if we couple that with my hopefully clarified definition, things can be valuable. What's really awesome and interesting to me, his gold example is the sort of argument I would give, but I never gave. And he comes to it because he's trying to interpret my argument as generously as he possibly can. When you're having some sort of Socratic or dialectical argument, the goal is to respond to one another's claims to get closer to the truth. And you can see Lance doing that by himself. He's doing his best to fill in the blank that I left as well as he can with this gold explanation. And it's really pretty good. And you see how unbelievably close to the argument I would make it is, because I'm saying one's personhood is valuable to them, whether they're aware of it or recognize it. And he's considering value to only be the act of valuing it. He talks about it over and over again as a verb. And I get that. And I agree with it. But I also want to talk about value and something being valuable as a noun, as referring to something which has the collection of properties that allow us to value things in that verb-like way. And so in the case of firewood, it has the properties that allow me to satisfy a rationally constructed desire that I can freely pursue. And in the case of us, my personhood is what allows me to actively value anything at all. So in that I'm seeing it as a noun, the contradiction he's asking for is perfectly described when he talks about how it would be sort of stupid for someone to say, my 100 ounces of gold is 100 ounces and your 100 ounces or grams or whatever it is of gold isn't. What someone's doing if they deny someone else's personhood is saying, my personhood has the properties that allows me to have and satisfy particular desires and fulfill my purposes and accomplish my goals. And that's what makes them valuable as properties of me as a person, as a noun. So my personhood is valuable and yours isn't, even though the properties that make me capable of valuing are the exact same as the properties that make you capable of valuing. The only difference is the object of our desires, or our subjective preferences, or the particular things that turn our crank. But no matter what those are, even if we take all of those away, our personhood is valuable. So for a sort of simple, informal presentation of the contradiction that Lance was asking for, it would be saying, my personhood is valuable, regardless of my subjective preferences, my purposes, or my goals, because it allows me to satisfy any of my desires, fulfill any of my purposes, and fulfill goals, regardless of what they are. Identically, your personhood allows you to have and pursue any subjective desires you might have, purposes you might fulfill, and goals you might want to accomplish. So when I say mine's valuable and yours is not, I'm contradicting myself because the value has nothing to do with my stance or my subjective preferences or my particular desires. And that segues nicely into this next section, which is about whether or not that contradiction could generate any sort of obligation or normative force if there isn't God there to punish you.
Is it not possible to say, no, I understand it, I just don't care? If someone says, okay, well, I guess the idea would be that you're contradicting yourself or something. So that's the mistake. Well, what if someone says, yeah, I am contradicting myself, I don't care? I mean, I don't think there is a contradiction here, but okay, so then the mistake is, it's a mistake according to the laws of like classical logic? What if they're like, okay, and I don't care about that. I'm cool with this contradiction. Then what?
And I think the short answer here is then we don't need to listen to you. Ultimately, if you're going to say, no, I don't follow the rules of rationality, I just do whatever I want whenever I want, I'm not a slave to logic, then we can't really have any idea what the fuck you're talking about. Because regardless of whatever theory of meaning I want to commit to or the way we say language works, because no matter what your theory of meaning, it seems like there has to be a logical structure governing it. So if you're going to say, I don't care about logic, I don't care about contradicting myself, then we can say, as Aristotle said to the skeptic, we can't really understand you. You've rendered yourself mute. Because if you're saying, give me a gold nugget or a piece of firewood or show me your feet, I can't have any idea what you're talking about because one of the things that identifies the gold nugget or the firewood or your feet is that they are not the things they are not. We're all committed to a principle of non-contradiction. Korsgaard, I hope I'm not attributing an argument to her that she didn't make, especially if it's not good. But I think she put it this way. If I call your name and you respond, you're working with the principle of non-contradiction. If I say Lance, he's not like, oh, I didn't know if you were talking about me, Lance, and all of the people who are not Lance. Names single a person out. Words single out meanings. Even if we don't have the identical referent or idea or mental representation in mind, if you ask me for a mug, I have to at least give you something that is not a mug. Or language didn't work, meaning didn't work. We can't understand one another. So if you're going to throw all those rules out, we would just be totally justified in being like, we have no fucking idea what you're talking about. We aren't going to really listen to you. So that would be the consequence. And I think it would be a justifiable consequence.
So what? So like if I have certain goals and values, like I don't value other people's goals and interests, and I want to trample on them, and doing so is somehow a contradiction. Well, I think at that point I would say, okay, well then I'm cool with contradictions. And if you say, but that's a contradiction, yeah, well then I don't care because when I'm acting, what I'm trying to do is achieve my goals and values, and uh, I am not some sort of like puppet to logic. So if logic is in the way of my values, so much for logic. I would just ignore it. And I don't know why anyone else, like why other people wouldn't also do this. Like, why would you comply with logic if it didn't get you what you wanted? Why would you do that? Like, and it's the same with math. The reason I think you should do math well is because it'll get you what you want. Doing bad math isn't going to get you what you want. Same with logic. So I see logic and math as instrumental tools, and their truth is a result of their utility, not vice versa. I think people get it the other way around. Oh, they're useful because they're true. No, they're true because they're useful. Uh, so, and this is why I take a pragmatist view on these sorts of things. And it's the same thing with morality. So the type of morality he's describing, this morality without God, is totally toothless. And you could try to graft it on to logic or rationality or something like that. And it's not going to make any difference to me. So violating a moral rule, there's no consequences to that. Saying, but it's irrational to violate this moral rule. Okay, well, if being rational means acting in ways that don't achieve my goals and values, I'm not particularly concerned with being rational then I'm anti-rational. Or if it's somehow it's illogical, well, then that's a form of logic that I don't care for. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna just conform with rules that like my goal is to achieve my goal. Like, sorry, with my goals. I don't know if I have these meta goals. I want to achieve my goals. That's what I'm trying to do. If some philosophical consideration is an impediment to that, so much for the philosophical consideration. That's just a simple way to put it.
So first and foremost, I want people to know I don't think Lance is some sort of sociopath out there completely ignoring or caring or considering other people's wants, needs, and desires other than how they fulfill his goals or satisfy his purposes or align with his values. I think he's pointing out, though, that there's a problem if we expect a moral theory to provide praise, blame, punishment, and accountability to people who do wrong things. The sort of theory that I'm advocating for isn't going to do that for you, but it's going to justify our doing it. So the person who says, ooh, Fuck your personhood. I don't care about you. I'm going to shit all over you and use you however I want for my own satisfaction. It points out that we're justified in preventing them from doing that. And we might be justified in punishing them in certain ways. And if they object and say, well, why are your ideas about this? Why are your beliefs regarding right and wrong better than mine? Well, we say, because they don't entail contradictions. Well, I don't care about contradictions. That's okay. You don't have to care about contradictions. If you're okay with contradictions, go stand in the corner. Don't talk to anybody, don't do anything, and don't interact with other people, because avoiding contradictions is a necessary condition of interacting with us at all. If you're completely going to be like, fuck it, I don't care, I'll contradict myself all the time. Down is up is down. I'm a wild man. Great. But we can't deal with you. And I think that's kind of a cool place to leave it. I have not supported that claim at all, but I also want to address some of the comments from Lance's comment section that I attempted to respond to every one night, and I think YouTube thought I was spamming Lance, so it erased half of the comments I gave. So I want to make sure the people who took the time to comment on Lance's video and offer criticisms of my view, that I respond to them. And I also want to leave a little something out there, I'm sure I left a lot out there, for Lance and I to talk about if and when we're able to get together and do something. So on to Lance's comment section. The first comment says, regarding valuing the prerequisites for other values, a person in his comment section suggested a counterexample. I couldn't possibly derive any value from chemotherapy if cancer did not exist. Chemotherapy is subjectively valuable, stance-dependent valuable if you have cancer. The value of chemotherapy depends on it existing in a context in a world where people have cancer. Value not having cancer and chemotherapy is a reasonable means to that end. So I don't see how that'd be a problem for the position, because I'm not saying any of the characteristics of chemotherapy are necessarily valuable. I'll throw this one in here even though it's not for me. Lance, your very straight, level-headed, rational approach to these subjects has made things a lot clearer for me and changed my views. Go Lance. I think we have a slippery slope where once people don't recognize these values or violated, say, property or dignity, then such a person may start to pose a threat to us. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. That's why we do something about it. This argument leads not only to an anti-choice position, but to an anti-contraception one. Wearing a rubber destroys a future value creator. It could lead to those, but I think that those arguments are lame and they don't work, because potential persons or potential persons aren't conscious beings. And when we're talking about abortion or contraception, we're talking about actual persons in the world and comparing their value to something that's a possible potential person. So I could see how similar arguments could lead to an anti-choice position, but certainly not mine. Because a zygote isn't conscious. A zygote isn't a person. And a pregnant person almost always is a person. There's a really great, really long comment on here from Cloud of Time, and YouTube didn't delete it. So rather than me explain it and go over it, I'll just encourage you to go read it. I might give an extra thumbs up for satisfying my desire when I satisfy many desires at once. Drinking water and not Coke is great because it quenches my thirst and is also healthy, but wanting to be healthy is still a subjective desire. Absolutely. And my argument is that wanting anything at all, desiring anything at all, satisfying any desire at all is the result of being a person. So any desire, anything you value subjectively or based upon your own stance or point of view, is the result of personhood. Plan on getting him on the show for a chat? Yeah, we chatted, and hopefully we'll do it again. This view seems really bizarre. I don't value atoms per se, and if I did value atoms, would I also have to value quantum fields? Would this further imply I value all arrangements of excitations of all quantum fields? It doesn't entail that you value them, but it means that certain excitations of quantum fields and certain concatenations of atoms are valuable to you. Absolutely. His argument is wrong because it contains too many Joe Rogan references. I had one Joe Rogan reference, and you can never have too many, especially if the joke was really funny, which all of my jokes are. This guy sounds like Inspiring Philosophy. I don't know who Inspiring Philosophy is, but I feel bad for him. I'm sorry. And I think those are all of the comments that had directly to do with me. Go check out the video and the comments section, add to it, and if more comments show up there, they might give Lance and I something to, a little grist for the mill, as they say. And there you have it, my response to Lance's video about my video. The other video on Lance's channel that I wanted to talk about was the recording of a live discussion he and I had. And really, it was just such a loose, informal thing. There's not a lot for me to say or too many mistakes for me to walk back. One of the things I probably wasn't as clear about was my disdain for YouTube debates has to do with the fact that I don't think anybody's pursuing them with the goal of getting smarter. It's just about trying to win. And the audience or judges who are determining the winner have no interest in really identifying the best reasons or best beliefs or best arguments. Usually what they're about is, let me present something that will really validate what my followers already believe, so they'll get riled up and watch my channel more, or cheer me on more, or send me money or something. I don't think that there's much value in that I'm interested in. I don't find it very entertaining or interesting. I also was kicking myself because I remember I said something that I worried people would construe as me saying that like all Christians or all Christian apologists or all Christian churches were just about making money and that they were cult-like. I do not believe that. I do believe some people use faith and religion in order to make a buck. I also believe that cults are very profitable for cult leaders. But I don't think all churches or all Christian churches or all churches that have anything to do with Jesus are cults. I have a ton of respect for a lot of people who practice Christianity. As far as you know, I share many of their beliefs. It also made me reflect a little bit on my last comments on comments video and how much of a dick I felt like I sounded. And I kind of leave that video up there just as sort of penance, just to remind myself not to be an asshole, not to be a jerk, not to record something if I'm in a bad mood or I'm going to be edgy and snippy. And if I do, to own it. But mostly the biggest takeaway from my encounters with Lance and the folks in his chat and the folks in his comment section is how valuable a discussion can be, about how much you can learn about your own view or how to explain it, or the weaknesses in the position, or the weaknesses that you take for granted. And talking to people with different backgrounds who might be younger or older than you, who might be newer or more experienced, might have different set of interests. But talking about the ones that overlap and challenging each other respectfully and thoughtfully can lead to really, really cool stuff. And it's kind of appropriate because that's what my channel is really all about. And it's kind of invigorated me and motivated me to stick to that and really focus on doing my best to put stuff out there that challenges people to think and think better. And when I'm doing that, inevitably the comments and feedback and critique that I get challenges me to learn and think better. So thank you, Lance. Thank you, everyone in his comment section. Thanks to all the people in the chat. And thank you all for taking the time to watch. And I look forward to seeing your comments and your feedback, because this is a discussion and our ideas will get better. So thank you all so very much for the time. I really do appreciate it. I will see you in the comments section. Bye.